Hours of service, for whatever reason, is a huge problem for a lot of fleets.
How can fleets best manage driver hour of service and ensure compliance with regulations regarding maximum driving hours?
I think it comes down to a couple of things. Number one, it comes down to just not holding drivers accountable to these issues. So, it's not reasonable to expect you to have a 0% violation rate if you're a fleet of any size. You're going to incur violations. But my concern and the concern of the DOT is always kind of patterns of noncompliance. And so what I found is that fleets who struggle with hours of service, more often than not, they're struggling because they are not holding their drivers accountable to the violations that occur roadside. And then those start to add up over time. And all of a sudden, we've got a pattern of noncompliance with the hours of service regulations because there are no consequences. You're not holding your drivers accountable for those violations. They incur them and they are allowed to go on their way without anything from you, but except maybe just, hey, maybe don't do that next time, something like that. If there aren't serious consequences for those violations, your drivers are just going to keep incurring them time after time. And before you know it, like I said, you've got a trend. And now those trends are what the DOT is looking for with CSA scores, for example. As you incur more and more hours of service violations, that's when your hours of service CSA score starts to tick up. And then next thing you know, DOT's knocking on your door to do an audit. So I think finding a way that works for your fleet to hold your drivers accountable to these rules is probably the most important thing that you can do to get control of the hours of service. The other thing is just education. A lot of times when it comes to fleets that have problems, systemic problems with hours of service, I find that it is because their drivers just don't understand those rules well enough. And there are certain areas, nuances of the hours of service rules that can get tricky, like personal conveyance use, for example, has always been a gray area within the regulations. Split sleeper berth is a complex aspect of keeping track of time. And so it's easy to get caught up in this web of complexity. But if you have a firm foundation of educating them on the topics where they are having trouble, then you can really start to get control of it. If you're saying, oh, we expect you to comply with the regulations, but then you're telling them, hey, you need to get the job done, even if you're running out of hours, what you're communicating to them is that you don't care about compliance. And so how can you expect them to care about compliance?
What should fleets be implementing to ensure their drivers receive proper training and possess the necessary knowledge about safety procedures, emergency protocols, and defensive driving technique?
I always like to kind of break training into a couple of buckets. The first bucket would be regulatory compliance. Again, going back to that idea of understanding the rules under which you are operating. If your drivers don't understand the hours of service rules, for example, then they're inevitably going to get tagged with hours of service violations during roadside inspections, and that's going to come back to haunt you as the trucking company that employs or contracts with them. And I recommend that it be recurrent training on regulatory compliance at some cadence, whatever cadence you pick. You could do it yourself if you want to have safety meetings, that type of thing. A lot of trucking companies will have periodic safety meetings where they bring all the drivers in, or they do it virtually nowadays, and they tackle a particular topic about regulatory compliance. If you don't want to do it yourself, like I said, you could source it from a third party. So that's the first bucket. The second bucket is defensive driving type training, how to actually safely operate the vehicles that you are expecting them to operate. Again, no shortage of third parties out there that offer that type of training. You hear a lot of people talk about Smith's system and other trainings like that. But I think those are the two big buckets that you need to focus on when it comes to driver training.